Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey-Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I am your webcast moderator. Today is Friday, December 8th. Oh man, December. And we will hear the presentation, Unlocking Civic Data, Shaping Future Cities Through Information. For technical questions related to the presentation, you can type those in the Q&A box, and I will do my best to filter and find those and try to help you with any of your technical questions. For questions related to the presentation, again, you can just type those in the Q&A box. We will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. I will ask if your question is for a particular panelist that you state that when you're writing out your question. It just helps me. Coming up on your screen is a list of our sponsoring APA chapters and divisions for 2023. Thanks to all those participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible and free to members. Today, we're sponsored by the technology division of APA. So thanks for joining us. And we appreciate all the webcasts that you brought us this year. And we look forward actually already to another one coming up in early 2024. Today's session has been approved for 1.5 CM credits. To log your credits, head over to planning.org, log into your My APA account, and from there you can search by today's title or event number, both of which can be found on our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. If you're on social media, be sure to like us on Facebook. That's where I post any important date or time changes. I also post when new sessions are available for you to register for, and a reminder of our upcoming weekly session. We record all of our presentations and we post them onto our YouTube channel. So head over to YouTube and type in Planning Webcast and we'll pop up along with our well over 450 session recordings. All of those are available to view for free. So subscribe to our channel so that you get notified when new sessions are, session recordings are up and available for viewing. Again, if you have any questions for our panelists, type them in the Q&A box. We'll get to those at the end during the designated Q&A. We also have a couple polling questions that will be popping up throughout today's presentation to interact with you a little bit. And also, this is our last webinar of 2023. We're closing out strong here. And in fact, I think I have like 6 or 7 webinars already scheduled for 2024. So be sure to head over to our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast to register for all of our upcoming sessions. Don't go just yet. Probably Monday or Tuesday of next week is when I'm starting to unroll some of our 2024 sessions. So be sure to stay tuned. With that, I am going to turn it over to you, Sarah, to kick things off.
Thank you so much, Christine, and welcome everyone today. We are so excited to be sharing with you today. My name is Sarah Bassett. I am on the board of the APA Technology Division. We're very excited to be partnering with the Women in Data Seattle chapter to be giving you this presentation about unlocking civic data, shaping future cities through information. I am here today with Alla, Zaytseva, and Ruchi, Arora, who will be walking us through a couple different questions around this topic. But first, I just wanted to let everyone know that with the APA Technology Division, everything you see here today will be up on our GitHub repository. If you don't know about the repository, it is a great place for all things urban and regional planning resources, both data, knowledge sharing, information, and otherwise. So please stay tuned. We will do some posts on LinkedIn and our social media, our newsletter about this information. So anything of interest you see here today will be up on there, as well as a host of other information. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of different things, but we're going to be talking about this idea of humanizing data. What does it mean to think beyond just points of information, but really the people behind that data? As urban planners, we're well versed in this, but provide new texture to these concepts. We're also going to be talking about how do we effectively communicate the risk of using data, and how can we think about different forms of biases that exist within that, and what do we do about it? How do we build a data team? This is an increasingly important question as we have more and more data to work with. And so what are different strategies and effective ways to help build good data teams and data governance strategies? We'll also be finishing on this idea of visualization, data visualization, and thinking about the way we can best represent that data and present that to our communities, our clients, our different agencies that we might work with. But first, we want to start with a poll about what caught your attention to attend today.
All right. I have just now launched the question, and I probably should have told our panelists, you don't get to vote. So you might not even see it up on your screen, but you will be able to see the results. So folks, there should be a pop-up on all of your screens now. Go ahead and make your selections there. If you are on a mobile device, depending on your settings, you may or may not be able to see the pop-up. So I'll give it a few more moments. Excellent. 5, 4. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. And let's see what we've got here. So the question was, what caught your attention to attend today? And it looks like the greatest group, 31%, humanizing data, right? And let's see, we've got 29% visualizations, 28% communicating the use and risk of data and tech. It looks like those were the biggies. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. So really all the things, that's what caught their eye.
So that is very exciting. So thank you so much, Christine, and thank you everyone for participating. I am excited to hand it over to Alla Zaytseva, who will talk to you more about exactly those questions. So Alla, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Alla, and I'm a data analyst at a fintech startup. My background is in economics and intercultural communications. I'm also the co-lead for the Seattle chapter of Women in Data. And for those of you who have never heard about it before, I'll do a quick introduction. And after that, we'll dive in biases in data. And in the end, I'll do my best to give advice on how to reduce those risks and biases in data. Next slide, please. So Women in Data is an international nonprofit organization whose focus is on increasing diversity in data careers. We do this through awareness, education, and really just supporting our members through every stage of their careers. Next slide, please. We are a global community with more than 40,000 members in over 50 countries and chapters in 60 cities. Next slide, please. Our members have access to a lot of benefits, including free career services, portfolio help, mentorship programs, networking opportunities, free access to Data Camp, which is a platform for upskilling. And also my absolute favorite, Data Curiosity Program, which is a course for young girls from 7th to 12th grade, where they are introduced to data. Next slide. At the Seattle chapter, we support the organization's mission by organizing networking and educational events, inviting speakers from the data field, and just supporting chapter members with advice and peer mentorship. Our goal is to empower each member with the resources that they need to thrive in their data careers. It is absolutely crucial to have organizations like Women in Data or Women in Tech groups. But before we talk about why it's so important, let's look at the numbers. So I'm sure that a lot of you have seen these numbers before. Women make up about 25 to 28% of the workforce in major tech companies. And in the previous years, we've seen only marginal increases. Women hold only about 20% of tech leadership roles. Only 35% of STEM graduates are women. Women are more likely to leave the tech industry mid-career than men. Studies suggest that up to 56% of women in tech leave their job at the mid-level point, which is more than double the quit rate than men. In the field of data science, women represent less than 20%, which can lead to biases in data analysis and algorithm development. And finally, only 2% of female-led startups receive venture capital funding. Next slide, please. And while the representation of women is so low, here's an interesting thing. A study shows that companies with women in leadership positions are more profitable than those without. Here you can see a graph from the policy brief produced by the Peterson Institute of International Economics. It shows the financial analysis of 62,000 companies from 58 economies from 1997 to 2017. Here it shows that companies with at least one woman in a leadership position are more profitable than companies with only male leadership. And having seen that inclusion of women can greatly boost financial performance of companies, it becomes more clear that female underrepresentation is not only a loss for women, it is a loss for economy's productivity and society as a whole. We need women's representation. We need women's perspectives in all areas of life, because if we fail to include them, then we're risking to create products and policies that benefit only half of the population. And that's why it is crucial to have organizations like Women in Data. They encourage women they encourage more women to work in data by creating a supportive community, by providing mentorship, organizing networking events, promoting success stories, educating and introducing younger generations. Next slide, please. And now I want to show you some examples of unconscious bias in our daily life. Gender bias in data is not just a statistical concern. It can lead to policies and practices that are not only ineffective, but they can actually harm women. So here are two quick examples, and then we'll go deeper into two case studies. Did you know that women are 71% more likely than men to be moderately injured in a car crash? And 17% of women are more likely than men to die in a car crash. This happens because most crash testing has historically used dummies based on the average male body. This practice completely ignores critical physiological differences between men and women. Women's bodies are not just scaled-down versions of men's. They have different muscle distribution, joint strength, and susceptibility to different injuries like whiplash. Congress is now putting pressure on the Biden administration to adopt more realistic female crash dummies, but the progress, unfortunately, has been slow. Next slide, please. Another gender gap comes from biking patterns among men and women. Only about 25% of US cycling trips are made by women. According to the League of American Bicyclists report, the main reason for that disparity is safety concerns. Women say that feeling unsafe keeps them from biking at the same rate as men. This is why high-quality bike infrastructure will help close the gender gap. In Scandinavian cities known for their bikeways, for instance, Copenhagen, the gender gap has been completely eliminated. In Denmark, women make up 55% of cyclists. Next slide, please. Now I want to show an example that I feel is a bit closer to the planner's expertise. As a human being who engages with urban planning on a daily basis, I believe that eliminating gender bias in urban planning is crucial because these decisions affect everyone's daily life. But here's where the challenge lies. Even our most relied data sources, like the US Census, can carry biases. While they provide invaluable insights into the demographic data, they might not fully capture the nuanced needs of all groups, especially women. And this isn't just a statistical problem, it's an ethical one. When we plan cities and communities, based on data that doesn't fully represent the whole population. We create environments that don't meet everyone's needs. It is also important to mention that gender bias in data is very often unintentional. Again, it is unconscious bias. Let's look at the unlikely subject for gender bias, a snow clearing policy in a small town in Sweden called Karlskoga. The town's approach to snow plowing seems very logical at first. First, they would clean the snow off of the main roads, and after that, the sidewalks and walking paths. However, they didn't account for differences in traveling patterns among men and women. The surveys that were conducted by the city council showed that men mostly commuted to and from work, while women did small errands, like dropping off kids at school, doing grocery shopping, and visiting elderly family members. The survey also showed that women walked more, often pushing strollers through the snow. The city council in Karlskoga reversed their approach, plowing the sidewalks and walking paths first. And almost immediately, they saw a huge impact of this change. It reduced the amount of people, women in particular, that were admitted to emergency rooms with injuries from falling in the snow. It also had an economic impact from lowering healthcare costs. So such gender-sensitive considerations had a huge impact on the community, particularly benefiting women. Next slide, please. And now I would like to talk about another example from urban planning. This time it is from Vienna, Austria, where a female urban planner, Eva Kale, has transformed the city based on gender-sensitive data. I will share 3 projects she initiated in the 90s. And even though it has been over 30 years, her approach is still considered one of the best. So in 1985, the UN proposed a global strategy for gender equality called gender mainstreaming. And gender mainstreaming is a practice of ensuring women and men are equally accounted for in policy, legislation, and resource allocation. In 1991, Eva Kale, a young urban planner, initiated an exhibition named Who Owns Public Space? Women's Everyday Life in the City. The exhibition showed lives of 8 different women and girls, from a young child to a wheelchair user to an active retiree. This showcase highlighted women's concerns such as safety and ease of movement. The city planning followed up with a survey that uncovered the differences in ways men and women use transportation. And roughly 2/3 of car journeys were made by men, while 2/3 of walking trips were made by women. They also found that women walked more, they walked more than men, who typically commuted to and from work in cars. Women, in contrast, used buses, streetcars, sidewalks, subway lines. And just like we saw in the Sweden example before, women had more smaller trips running errands. And the city's walking space and public transportation were not tailored to these needs. Next one. After the exhibition and analyzing the survey, the city widened 3,000 feet of sidewalks, installed benches and sitting areas, improved street lighting in 26 areas that were identified in the surveys as anxiety-inducing. Traffic lights were altered to prioritize pedestrians, and 5 areas were made entirely barrier-free to better accommodate strollers, wheelchair users, and elderly people. And the link between wider sidewalks, benches, and gender might seem unclear at first, but Kale said it is a question of ensuring equality of opportunity and access. For example, for an elderly person, a well-placed bench might make a huge difference between participating in the city life and staying at home. Next slide, please. Another project Kale initiated is called Women Work City. In 1992, the city of Vienna created Women's Office and appointed Eva Kale as the head. The office was responsible for gender-specific planning. At the time, the city was expanding, but female architects were not even invited to pitch their projects. So Kale's response was to invite only women architects, which back then made up just 6% of the profession. She invited them to submit proposals for a social housing project, with women's everyday life as an essential criterion of the design. So the complex was done in 1997, and it included 360 units, and it was characterized by a woman's perspective at every level. It had a stroller storage on every floor. It was designed to be car-free with underground parking. Kitchens or family rooms, living rooms, face the courtyards or play streets. These features gave parents peace of mind about their children's safety while they were playing outside. A kindergarten, daycare, clinic, shops in the residential area added to the convenience for both working and stay-at-home mothers. Next slide, please. And here is the third project that Kale initiated. It transformed parks in Vienna. So in 1997, there was a study done by two female sociologists. It showed that after the age of 9, park usage by boys and girls dramatically changed from roughly equal usage to girls almost disappearing from parks. The sociologists used surveys to discover that girls were not disinterested in using parks, but the presence of only one large open space in the parks resulted in the more assertive boys dominating the park for soccer and other sports. And girls felt like they couldn't or didn't want to compete for space. So between 2000 and 2006, the city created 6 model parks to see how they could get more girls to play outside. The changes included well-lit footpaths to make parks safer and more accessible, as well as smaller play niches, volleyball and badminton courts that girls had indicated a preference for in the surveys. And almost immediately, officials noticed the presence of a wider range of people in the parks. After 26 years, it is now a common practice in Vienna to approach city living and planning through a gender lens. And in 2008, the UN Human Settlements Program recognized Vienna's urban planning strategy as best practice. Next slide, please. And wrapping up my presentation, I want to repeat some of the points that I mentioned earlier. First of all, very often gender bias is unintentional. It is unconscious bias. And it's very natural for us as humans to judge a situation or make an assumption based on our own experiences. That's why it is so important to challenge our own beliefs, especially when serving diverse groups. Another point is that no matter what work you do, what title you hold, it is so important to have data literacy skills because data is all around us everywhere. We need to be critical of the source and of the data itself. And here's the thing. The word data is very scary. Many people think right away about data science, databases, data engineering, which is even scarier, to be honest. But data means just information. To do data analysis means to do research. And the word research resonates with women because there are a lot of women in research. So do not get discouraged by the word data. Also, representation matters. In her book, Invisible Women, Caroline Criado Paris talks about how when women are involved in decision-making, in research, in knowledge production, women do not forget about other women. They create products and policies that benefit everyone. So this is why it is crucial to have a wide representation on the decision-making teams. In addition, I personally encourage everyone to work with data professionals, if possible, of course, because they can help identify and reduce bias. I recently talked to a data scientist in healthcare and who told me that they use this special methodology implemented in code that compensates for bias in data. And as we know, there are a lot of biases in medical data. And finally, my advice is never stop educating yourself. And here are some resources I wanted to share with you. So the book that I mentioned earlier is called Invisible Women. It talks about the gender information gap in all areas of life, from tech to healthcare. Another book is called Unmasking AI. This book provides insights in how AI is developed and applied. It reveals gender and racial biases, which is crucial when we create inclusive and equitable urban spaces. Next slide, please. Another two resources will help you to create better surveys and get more quality data. The first resource is a course on survey design from the University of Michigan. I strongly believe that survey skills are essential to reducing the risk of bias in data. Also, as I mentioned in the beginning, Women in Data provides free access to Data Camp, which is a platform where you can learn all sorts of data-related skills. Next one. And finally, you can watch these TED Talks on data literacy by Luciana Padua and Jordan Morrow. Something Jordan Morrow said in his TED Talk resonated with me. It goes like, data literacy is not data science. Not everyone in this world needs to be a data scientist, but everyone needs to be comfortable with data. And I 100% agree with that statement, because we can all benefit from basic data literacy skills. And it's such an essential skill in this data-centric world. So I hope that these resources are helpful and make it easier to navigate this scary world of data. And in order to feel more comfortable with data, what resources would you want to sign up for? And we're flowing into our poll. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. We are going to launch another poll here. All right, here it comes. If I can pull it up, here they are. All right, folks. So again, the question is, which of these resources would you most likely sign up for? And if you wouldn't mind repeating, there's a question here, repeating the book titles that you mentioned.
I can post them in the Q&A.
If you post them in the chat, I will get them out to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do that.
Thank you. All right, I'll give it another second here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and show the results. So 40% say data upskilling webinars hosted by the technology division, and then 20% online resources for beginners, 18% data camp, data literacy training. Okay. I have stopped sharing and we are good to move on.
What amazing insights and great first part. Thank you, Alla. Moving on. Hi, everyone. I'm Ruchi Arora. I have been in IT industry for over a decade now, handling big data day to day. Currently, I manage data team as a data analytics manager at Starbucks in supporting their global store dev technology business. I also lead a Seattle Women in Data chapter along with Alla. And moving on to provide more insights on how we can build and get this data implemented in our organization and into day-to-day life. Data governance and building highly scalable data teams. Starting with that, moving on. Common data challenges and why we think data governance is utmost necessary. Data privacy concerns. As you must have seen now, there is a shift towards digital solutions, which requires access to large amount of data that can raise concerns about privacy and protection. In order to implement data protection regulations and policies that ensures that personal data should be anonymized and protected. Biases in algorithms. They are often based and trained on data that is not representative of the entire population. This can lead to unfair and inequitable outcomes for certain groups of people. In order to address this, they should be trained on diverse data sets, transparent and explainable. Need for human oversight. AI, ChatGPT, data strategy, and others can solve a lot of us and a lot of problems which we see ahead can give a quicker turnaround. But there is a stronger need for a human oversight to ensure they're working as intended, they're producing fair and accurate results. The human insights or human oversights of these systems, and there are mechanisms in place to correct any errors and or the biases which is in front. Technical limitations. Technology is still evolving in various fields, and there could be a technical limitations. We need to ensure the systems need to be current, adhering to the changes and the dynamicity which arises through the technology changes. Moving on. How do we build this data governance strategy? Building strong governance strategy includes data quality, protection, compliance, and much more. In my experience of being in industry, I focus and we stay as per industry on 4 strong principles. Staying focused on data governance, leveraging benefits of control, build and customize the data governance strategy, and as data proliferates, iterate, repeat, evolve, and reskill. Moving on, why we focus and why there is a need to focus on data governance. According to Data Governance Survey 2023, 62% of companies just started working on data governance few years ago. Now, why there is a shift? And why is this shift now? The volume of data and number of data sources are exploding. IDC estimates the data created and copied annually is 88 trillion gigabytes by 2024. And companies are struggling with controlling and managing it at all. Businesses are facing increased calls for compliance by organizations at GDPR, HIPAA, CCPA, which PwC calls the beginning of America's GDPR. Improve the quality of their data to help business makes better decisions, which are more data driven. A 2020 report, Dataversity, this is the latest we have, found that 62% of respondents did not have a high level trust in their own enterprise data. Moving on, benefits of control. The first and foremost of this control, I would say we need to empower people to fix the problem and find the opportunities where it exists. When executed well, data governance can provide the following rewards to any enterprise or organization. A, better regulatory compliance. Data governance sets rules and procedures that are around ownership and accessibility of data. Who owns the data, how they can access and share it across to internal users, to external, to customers, and around it. Without it, the sensitive information can go in wrong hands, leading to government or regulatory financial penalties, lawsuits, etc. Increase data security. As data breaches are on high, these key projects where human life is at stake, healthcare and other industries, it becomes topmost priority for the business to protect and safeguard the data. Data security hinges on traceability, knowing where it comes from, where it is, who can access it, how it is used, and how to delete it when it changes. Financial industry, fintech analytics, and others clearly needs a benefit or the rules set around it. Designing the preliminary framework and establish a stronger team. Establish a core team of stakeholders and data stewards to do the preliminary work in creating a data governance framework. It begins with performing an audit to identify issues where your current policies and areas need improvement. Moving on. Now, what's the framework of building this core team which can support this function in an organization? Few key principles where you can design the framework and establish a team. A, establish a core team of stakeholders and data stewards to do the base work around it. Begin by performing an audit to identify those issues, find those gaps in the organization, what policies you need, what areas need the improvement, and an immediate fix around it. Then design a business case for data governance. Define guiding principles that pinpoint what's important, what's must have, what can wait, and establish decision rights that identify what decisions need to be made around it, who will be involved in making them, and how they will be made. Core team should have a governance council that includes executives where data is being governed and stakeholders from all parts of organizations to ensure rules and procedures are cross-functional, which is requirement for the compliance. You know, in today's industry, there are various functions, various teams that co-collaborate, co-create any given solution. There is no team or no department that can function without collaborating with others. There's a lot of, it's kind of web where you collaborate and work. At this time, having these rules and policies clearly laid out reduces the ambiguity around it, and it clears the clarity between the leadership and downwards in your team to implement that solution. Council should clearly define roles and responsibilities. It often defines it clarity and also a structure in the team within it. Who will own the program or the implementation? Who will own certain types of areas of data? Who will own the policies and how these policies will be enforced? Moving to next. Now it's time to build and customize your data governance strategy. You have the basic framework that works for you, that needs to be evolved based on what you see in industry, what works for in your organization. It needs to be catered for that department. It needs to be very specific for the audience that uses it and also the domain where you are using it. Define we'll go with the 4 principles around how you can customize this that can help lay the framework better. Define the requirements and policies. This is the next big step to define the problem you're looking to solve through data governance. Is it better regulatory compliance, increased data security, or the improved data quality? What are your key needs to immediately start and have this policy? There are always different approaches where you define this is my near real term or a short term or a long term solution. In the industry, it is called as crawl, walk, and run approach, or there are many names around it. Stopping the bleeding, there is an ideal solution where you can go to. Some examples may include providing access to more users. You create more transparency around the flow of data through the organization, which is very, very important on how the data is flowing and the lineage you can derive from that. Increase the accuracy of external data, determine the rights for using the data, and have a central source of truth. This is a kind of buzzword you must be hearing a lot of time, but you need a source, a trusted data source you can rely on, and entire organization metrics are based and coming out of that source of data. Restrict the sensitive information by design. GIS will help you grant the access and enable the access to the sensitive information to the intended user only. Track and categorize the sensitivity of data. What is my non-sensitive information? sensitive or extremely sensitive customer data, account information, user information, where you have your user information, your SSN and others that are categorized as PII and other sensitive information. Have this data classification also enabled by design. Institute a set of data and revoke an employee's access or grant an access based on the changes, moving, job terminations, others, and the changes, event changes that happen. Moving on to next slide. Second, assess the available tools and skills. There is always some way or procedures the organization is already doing it. Can we standardize those processes? Assess what is available and the skills that is needed. Identify if your organization has skills and tools needed to execute this program. You will need, if based on the gaps, as the people with skills in data modeling and architecture, business analysis, program and product manager to resolve ambiguity, cross-collaborate, manage this project at enterprise scale, database administration, and report development. We'll go over why each of this step is really important when you hire for a resource for the scale. Tools for data modeling, data cataloging and management, data movement, for example, data pipelines. There are hundreds of tools for do you use data modeling, why you need those data to be modeled. A strongly or a well-framed data model is very important for anything you want to scale on top of it. Once the foundation is well set, you can have AI, NLP, LLP, or any kind of ways on top of it to automate and generate your analysis on top of it. A strong focus on overall professional development and always upskilling and reskilling because of the changes this industry has in terms of tools, technology, people, and others is changing really fast. The volume of data is exploding. Identify and address the capabilities and gap. Once you have identified and assessed, fill those gaps. You can fill the gap by purchasing tools and hiring in-house specialists. Sometimes building in-house is expensive, but again, it depends on the industry. NYPD, for example, or others, where there needs to be a due diligence that needs to be done, what controls I'm using, what third-party specialist we are building, or anything around it. Trusted partner tools, what's available to you, and the third-party specialist and subject matter expertise around it. Moving on to next. Now it's time to execute. You have everything well set, and now you execute. Start with data modeling. You have identified those requirements, those gaps, the architecture, and you have the right skilled people around it, which involves the use of diagrams, symbols, the textual references to represent the way the data is flowing into the program and system from your source to destination, where it lands within the enterprise. Create a centralized metadata repository. This is a very important and key step. It stores metadata repository stores a descriptive information about your data model used and shared information about your data. It's the data about your data. It's such as the meaning, source, and the relative quality. You may have heard, or you can also have the, how do you measure these things, data quality? You can have a risk score, you can have a trusted score, you can have this model based on how and what level of implementation in it in as a metadata for your data in it. It will help you locate and secure your sensitive data. That's first and foremost a common problem across organization. How do I search and navigate my own data sets in an organization? Where does it exist? Is everybody using the same data sets? This enables the faster search and the standard search across organization. It helps you understand and manage the life cycle of your data. It can ensure the proper disposable at the end of life. This is a very key step, and as others, the data has its life cycle till when it is valid. what dimensions or what confirmed areas it is confirming to as the data quality and the governance. Are you purging, archiving, and disposing this data when it met the life cycle? A good example could be COVID pandemic and that data. You don't need that information, but when there was a need, there is a need to expose that reporting or visualization to all the areas. Represent your analysis through data visualization methods. Moving on to next. And as the last point, as data proliferates, again, iterate, evolve, and execute. As company data grows, you need to continue to establish rules and procedures around it, governance to scale, build more robust systems around it. It's a continuous organizational commitment. A change is everybody's responsibility that needs to grow, adapt to new compliance, business, and security challenges around us. Create a permanent data governance team and structure to meet those challenges. This will help ensure the future success of your organization. Moving on to the next area, how do you represent this data to the world? Data visualization. It's again a very broad topic on how I can represent my data, which is well modeled in my data platform. Now, how do I represent or take this information to in the organizations to get a clear and meaningful message out of it? So data visualizations are key to create and get your message across in a clear and a very impactful way. I would say there are few industry-wide, but we call it as magical 10 best practices to create this visualization. A, know your audience. This is a fundamental data visualization best practice to understand your audience. Who is this dashboard or this visualization you are building it for? Who it is designed for, what kind of decision you want the user to make. Is it strategic, operational, and tactical? Who is going to use it? Is it an executive summary or the leadership or CEO of organization? Or is it the data scientist, data analyst, and the person who is just looking at data who wants this information? Both the views are different. You need to define your personas based on what your audience are. What actions do you want them to take? Keeping your visualization simple and digestible. Less is more. Keeping it simple and easy to understand is the key. Carefully select the relevant data points. What is relevant? How historical you want? What's the current set? What is it, or you want more real-time analysis or real-time analytics around it? These points are very important to design. Avoid distracting elements. Allow your audience to answer questions and effectively strategize. Below are a few examples. If you see these graphs in the prior slide, the bars, the 3D representation, it looks cool, it's fancy, and the tools can give an amazing 3D structure. Maybe in the store design, I want to see 3D representation, but when I'm analyzing the revenue trend, this visualization doesn't work for me because I cannot read what's going on here. A simple graph with the labels, tooltips, and line is a better representation and simple enough to understand. Moving on to next. There are various graphs and charts around, and there are some industry practices on which one to use when, and deciding it's a key to decide on which data visualization is best for your use case. Below are some of the guidelines around it. Use the line charts to track the changes or trends over the time or relationship between two variables if you have. Bar charts are good for comparing the quantities in different categories around it. You can see how this spiking down and compare where you have two or more categories around it. A scatter plot to show correlation to the above when you have more or have three different data items. Two variables plotted against the parallel axis, sorry. Use the bubble chart to express a similar correlation of above when you have a different data items or a data sets of 3 different items. Tree maps for comparing proportions between categories via area size in a space efficient way. Some of the examples as in the slides. You can also read about clicking on the links as it will be shared. It gives a good idea of how these graphs are implemented, the color coding, and when in the real scenarios when it should be used. Moving on. In the similar lines, pie charts, when we can use them and when we should avoid them. If you have a small amount of data segments, pie charts are good to compare the slices around it. The best way to present data visually because the user needs to compare areas and angles, which can be difficult here. If the number of segments is too high or some of the segments are too small, the center of pie charts look messy and overwhelming. Too many pie slices doesn't give any information. Donut charts is another workaround to eliminate the problem of comparing angles by focusing more on the length of arc. Line charts are more clearly display a trend of ratio than multiple pie charts can. Here is a clear example and distinction what each chart means and how they can be represented. Moving on to next slide. After you have all your visualizations done and crafted, tell a story around it. What does your data points mean? Data visualization is a practice of telling a story with your data. It's represented by the facts, numbers, and a hypothesis that is tested. To tell a compelling story, your visualization need not convey the useful data, but it should also resonate with your audience what they are looking for. It should drive an action. It compares to something tangible, like a goal, SLA you have, you're comparing against it. Data quality should be greater than 99% or some tangible number against it, or a benchmark from the previous period. So you can clearly see what's my year over year analysis, month over month, or how the trends are looking like by different graphs. The best visualization present metrics in comparison with dynamic thresholds to help viewers better interpret the numbers. If there is a growing trend that's scaling upwards, there is a sudden dip, the seasonality is impacting it, or the sales where you see holiday seasons or some retail industry, it's spiking up, or you have some disaster, pandemic, or something which do not have control on, it goes down. So these are key points where you tell your story, why you see the change in the trend that's coming into you. Make your visualization interactive. There could be a static presentation of it, but with the tools in hand, what is available today, you can add the slicers and filters to your stories. Make it more user-driven with the features like tooltip, filters, and drilling that can transform your static visualization into more user-driven. I have a good North America and Canada data, for example, but I want to see how I'm performing across global as a true enterprise. Is my sales, how are my accounts, where my customer lies, what my scatter plot or map looks like in different areas. In our example, from where the users are joining from. The Seattle, this is example like where I can map, scatter plot, and see which areas where the more focus and intentions are coming from. Moving on to next. Final points on this. Know your data. Once you have a good understanding of your data, the challenges in front of you are easier. It's the new oil. And if something more precious and expensive or something comes in, it's your data. Build a strong data strategy. As they say, there is no AI strategy without a data strategy. AI, generative AI, and all this could still be a buzzword for you without an inline strong data strategy, data model around it, and understanding of data formats. Take an example of Alexa or any other tools which you know and you use day to day. If you do not have your data structured in a way, the answers or the questions you put to this tool, you can never have an accuracy or accurate results on it. So it all lies in the foundation, how you have modeled your data and how you have scaled it. Choose a right platform to build the data governance framework. Ethical data sharing. Data classification, as we saw, is the key. How I can classify it sensitive, not sensitive, and extremely sensitive. That enables data sharing or data protection. Know your rights, know what to share. Silo reduction, fragmentation, and the holistic experience, securing your data and the flexibility around it. Build a strong, diverse team with the right aptitude who knows how syntax and semantics are always evolving and changing. That can be built, skilled, and upskilled. Having a right aptitude, understanding, passion is the key. Have a story to tell which your audience can resonate. Moving on with this, with the poll, and handing off to Sarah for the final closing comments. Would you like to see more of this type of contents?
All right, that question has launched. Yes, no, maybe so. Give it a few moments here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead, end our poll here, and show the results. Yeah, the majority are saying yes, absolutely. Almost 60% there, and 30% are unsure. All right, back to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. So just as a brief recap of what Alla and Ruchi were discussing, I just wanted to do sort of a quick connection to some planning synthesis here around what are the advantages of thinking about the way we're using data and building data teams. Much of this in the planning community, of course, we work a lot with census data and other types of vendor data, but thinking about the advantages as we scale up in terms of the way we use data, the ubiquity of using data, and of course, the volume of data. So really using data as informed decision-making. I think this is something we use a lot in practice as planners, but how can we be really transparent about that? Using data, of course, as making predictions, particularly in terms of, say, the disaster community, transit or transportation analysis, using data as a way to make rationales around some of the decisions that are out there, right? Like our polling today, the transparency around what does everyone want in our public audience. How do we measure the impact of what we're doing as planners? Data is a great way to assess that, of course. We often put this in our metric sections in some of our planning work. And how do we involve the public differently using data? Something I want to really leave you with in terms of the questions you should be asking as you are working with data is, how do we rethink the quality and accuracy of the data we're using? And Ruchi touched on this in terms of, where's that data coming from? Who's using it? How do we make sure we're building a good strategy? So as planners, we know exactly where that data is coming from, if it's not public, if it's being built and given to us, and how does that inform the decisions we're making? Really questioning our over-reliance on data and thinking about it in terms of that humanizing aspect. So instead of relying exclusively on data, how can we use data to tell the story of what our communities and cities and partners need in our planning work? Of course, always confronting biases and misinterpretation, misrepresentation in the data. Really looking at and questioning reinforcing inequities. So how can we use data, of course, to tell that story of transparency, but not reinforce what we know are existing inequities? And then really challenging privacy. And of course, the conversation today around building a data team and thinking about some of these biases, how do we really challenge that privacy and what data we're using? So classifying that correctly. And no matter what level you're at with data, within the technology division. And just as planners, I sort of want to leave with some language around what does it mean to be data literate. So if you're just a beginner and you're curious about using data, or you're afraid of using data, one way to think about that level is you're a researcher. And Alla touched on this today in terms of data science, data engineering can often have sort of a perception, but if you just look at it as being a researcher, that might be a great entry point. If you're just a novice and you want to know more, you can think of yourself as an upskiller. So please join APA Technology Division if you're not a part of it already, be a part of Women in Data. And there's so many great online resources between both of us, and even more broadly about upskilling and feeling like you have better and more control over data in your planning work. And if you're already really comfortable with using data and feel very data literate, right, this is leadership level in terms of helping to manage and build those teams and think really thoughtfully about how we use data now and in our future with our communities. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for joining the technology division today, and Women in Data for being a part of this session. We are so excited to be delivering this to you today. And as promised, everything you saw here will be up on the APA Technology Division GitHub repository as just an information share, as well as all on our channels and social media sites. So thank you so much, and we'll hand it off to Q&A.
Excellent. Okay. Again, folks, if you have questions, type them in the chat box. It is helpful if you let me know who you want to answer the question. Okay. So first question, Alla, what are your recommendations for centering both gender and race in planning?
Yeah, thank you. So there are several strategies and things that you can do to ensure that you have that you are centering your planning around gender and race. It all starts with the inclusive data collection. Collect and analyze data that is broken down by both gender and race. It helps to understand specific needs of different groups. Make sure that data collection methods are sensitive to the nuances of these groups. For instance, you need to understand diversity within these groups, use culturally sensitive language, avoid assumptions. Another thing that you can do is community engagement, or you can reach out to your community, you can reach out to communities of diverse genders and races in the planning process. This could be focus groups, public consultations, collaborative projects. Also, as I mentioned before, representation matters. So you need to make sure that you have a diverse representation in planning teams and decision-making teams. And this includes not only diverse or gender and racial diversity, it also includes diversity in experiences and backgrounds. Another thing that I would definitely do is provide regular training for planners and policymakers in culture and just cultural and competence training. Yeah, and also it never hurts to partner with those organizations that that work with gender and racial equality. Yeah, these are the few examples of how to create more equitable and inclusive planning strategies.
Great, thanks. We're going to stick with you for a moment. The question is, I work with a lot of data, but I don't create the data sources. How do I get data for biases?
Yeah, I definitely expected that question. So, first of all, it is when you work with potentially biased data, it is important to study any guides that you get with this data, how it was collected, who are the respondents, how are gender and race represented in these data sets, if it's possible. Make sure not to fall into a sample bias trap. Sample bias is when your sample is not representative of the whole population. For instance, we can see it a lot in medical data. Also, when you're working with potentially biased data, make sure that you are supporting it or supplementing it with targeted surveys and studies. And as I mentioned before, first of all, it's important to learn how to create these surveys to make sure you don't include bias in your questions. These surveys and studies should have a goal to uncover the unique needs of diverse groups, including women and non-binary individuals. Also, as I mentioned before, reach out to your community. Reach out to diverse communities to hear their perspectives. Also, it is important to collaborate with gender experts and advocates, collaborating with data professionals as possible. As I mentioned before, they can identify and reduce bias in your data. They have special methodologies for that. Maybe you could even learn best practices from other cities, from other planning communities, how they do it, what type of data they use. And also, something that is really important is fostering a strong culture of inclusivity within the planning departments, because it all starts from the planning teams. It all starts with, it's very important to have diverse teams of planners who bring different perspectives to data collection, to data analysis and data results presentation. So yeah, these are some of the ways that you can work with potentially biased data.
And not to just kind of keep going at you, but there's another sort of relevant question. Anyone else is free to chime in. How can we ensure that the data has diverse responses? And from that, then how do we convert the responses into policies? Like, what are the things to be thinking about?
I can take this question as a start. So I work a lot with diverse groups and thinking about this exact question. So I'm so glad we got this. But there's a couple things that I sort of do in my work, which is depending on if you're working with a specific community compared to sort of a national, say, strategy or something. If you're working with a community, it's really identifying trusted leaders in that community to tap into the diverse groups that you might want to be a part of that particular planning effort. So that's really important, because then there's transparency through the whole pipeline from project initiation to sort of those final outputs. In terms of actually developing that into a policy, I really see it as two parts. One, of course, is our good planning work in terms of informing what those recommendations might be. So if there's a strong case for that and really a robust and sizable input, this, of course, makes a better case in order to push it through to sort of a legislation action. And so to me, it's that upfront work that takes a lot longer, a lot more trust building, but in the end, you can actually transform it into policy because there's so much buy-in over a long period of time. So I love that question, and I'm so glad we got that. But Alla, Ruchi, if you have more texture to that, please chime in.
I think you covered it perfectly.
Okay, great. Next question, Ruchi, let's go with you for this one. And the question is, hold on, let me grab this up here. Okay, can we talk about cell phone data? It's possible for smaller communities to afford it. Is it worth it? Are there affordable sources? What are the limitations, as in the pros, the cons, alternatives, all the things? Let's talk about it for a minute.
This is absolutely great question, but there are a lot of things to talk about. It's not one answer that may fit, but definitely getting mobile data is challenging. And if we are talking about the smaller to mid-size industry, affordability comes in picture. But there are several ways where you can work with the cell phone data on your own. If you have Android, Mac, or other devices, and you have all control, there are two parts to it. One part which you control as a user, other part which you sign in a long text which you agree on terms, NDA and all, which I don't know if you read the full text or a full 2-3 pages document, but knowingly or unknowingly you sign that you are ready to share some of your data or all of your data with the companies and organizations. And 3, the provider themselves have access to it. Now, as a user, what you have access to it? Go to your settings, look at your apps and see what you are sharing. Most of the options what you have there are checked by default. The common is location and other is like various parts to it on what. So carefully go and see and observe one. You'll be amazed and shocked by the default setting companies have in place to track and get the data from the devices which you have. All the devices from phone that is connected to your laptop, that is connected to your watch, that's connected to your headphones, what you're wearing, and then your AirTag. You can connect, find, and see the correlation on it. So there is a way to get this data. Now on the how part of it, how you can get this data. When you see and those options, if you have access to the source of it, you can save this data. Go as a chat backup, for example, or location backup from different apps which you are using. And if you use there, you have an options to save it on your drive or there and different formats to it. Taking an example of Tableau, because we talked about little bit about visualization, you can save it in .dat format or any blob or running formats. And once it is saved, you can port it or import it to various devices. That becomes your data source or a data set. And that you can use to n number of resources or connect it to different resources for your story, for your purposes, for your use cases. For example, I have my history or my data stored on my phone based on the maps which I used or others, the places which I go to. Now, do I need to create another location or a map kind of software to analyze few things? No. Maybe I can partner with the open source APIs that is already developed by different companies. Google, for example, I connect to their APIs to use the map and see where my user base is located or where the data is coming from or how I'm sharing my data across. I can use this information and model this data through the relationships, connect it, and then I can share it using our data visualization. So the smaller companies, you can build this tool in-house very easily. They're not expensive, but at the same time, to build this governance and policies around it, how you are sharing, you need an expertise around that thing. Hiring becomes very important for that skill to have in-house. There are small tools and free APIs. If you can trust all of them, I would say no. Have a trusted repository and a legal team from your organization, vet those, what you can use, and have always a paid version on it on what you are using. So once you have this information and the infrastructure set up, you can use the mobile device data according to your use cases, and experience and see a story, what it is telling you about the behavior or using. I would say the cell data is that dangerous and that's available. If I want to clone, or if you want to clone yourself, it's so easy to do it by the searches you are doing, by the way it is, where the places you are visiting and others. So it's a very valuable and important data you have on your phone. A good question. But there's no small answer to it. It's a different subject, maybe another webinar for that.
We'll sign you up. Another good question. How do you address, and this is for anybody. How do you address when someone interprets the same data differently than you and tells a completely different story? And or when there are conflicts internally about what the data is saying? What do we do? How does that work? Yeah.
Now, this is a great question. And I would say this is my day-to-day life. And in this case, when we talk about diversity, having that diversity is important because of that reason, because we want to hear those perspectives that you cannot. It is culturally different when you have the same data points and same story. The perception and how you read the data is very different. And if you have talking about surveys or different research studies that has been done, you would see each industry, each vertical, and each person will have different stories to tell with the same data. Now, how do I trust and how do I represent which is the right story? That's where comes your enterprise trusted data store. Have that data store, what we talked about, at one place that is governed by the same team. All the reports, all the matrices, your KPIs, your OKRs are generated from the same source. It is the hypothesis that is built. You will always have select the best. You never negate if the opinion or the conflict is different from the other user. Have those A, B, C, and D options always for you. That's why there is A/B testing. There are these experiments. Hold experiments against it and with the user base and the right sample size. Once you have these campaigns going, this testing in place, you know which hypothesis better. It's again data. It's again experiment. Is this? There is nothing right or wrong answer, and it's just different opinions. What works for others? How do I interpret and what I bet for the data?
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Here's another question for anyone here. The question is, what's your assessment of the quality of ACS data? And you're in a safe space, I think, so we can talk real about this. Particularly, this question is asking in small geographic areas. And they think perhaps it is questionable quality and perhaps there is some gender bias in ACS. I'm assuming they mean American Community Survey. I assume that's what they're talking about, but I could be wrong. So maybe whoever you are, type in if that's what you're talking about. Anyone have any experience with that?
So if I was interpreting it as American Community Survey data also,
Okay.
My go-to is always looking at the count data and the margin of error for that particular geographic area that it's capturing. And this is, to me, really a question around how much are we relying on data alone to tell the story of the community? And particularly if we're looking at, say, true representation, right? We want to use all of our good planning tools, data, sort of community narrative and understanding, sort of historical components, legal and otherwise, to really frame and tell that story. And this is actually a real opportunity to get into the data visualization piece around how are we visualizing that? How are we being transparent around that data? I don't know if we can make a true claim over the biases that exist in ACS data. I think it's probably safe to say every data set has some sort of biases. It's just how we talk about that, represent that data, and are really clear around those exact types of questions. But again, I always look at the cell for count and or margin of error just to understand what am I really looking at? And then true biases, right? This is what Alla was talking about in terms of collection and how we're framing some of those questions. And so national data sets are always more challenging just because it's about understanding scale and big picture than true granularity. So I think those are things to think about. But if anything, it's a bigger question around biases in data generally and how we're talking about and representing that in the work we produce.
Yeah, and it is
go
also
ahead.
important. It's also important to improve, to advocate for improvements in the ACS, in how ACS collects and categorizes gender data. Like there's always room for improvements, and maybe there are some strategies that could be implemented to increase response rates. Maybe some incentives could be offered.
I want to dive a little bit deeper into this. So this question says, a lot of data doesn't include information to vet bias. For instance, I work in transportation, so data is typically in terms of cars, buses, passenger numbers, measurements, all that. But it probably has biases within it that have been obscured, but we just, don't know what they are. And again, this is kind of going back to the American Community Survey and any of those larger scales where, you don't know what kind of bias is already built into it. So how do we combat that? And the question says, besides collecting it ourselves and knowing what these biases might be, but for many that's not an option and they need to rely on census data. Is there anything that can be done when looking at, that sort of data?
I would say yes. It's though the sample size, if you look at ACS data, the sample size is good enough. The variable size is good, but is it more diverse so that we can eliminate? We cannot eliminate the biases totally. It's a hypothetical scenario, but we can limit it to a certain degree. So what are those unconscious biases? Having a better understanding of those and incorporating that in culture itself. And having a team that's working on it to collect those data sets, these survey results and all. The question should be framed in a way, or all the intake and collection methods should include that as a parameter, where you check in, you input, you give those diverse perspectives. A product or use case that is valid for one industry does not work in other industry because of the differences it has. Leave men and women. There are geographical distributions where the biases can exist. And it's all unconscious. So these days, the enterprises, organization, and companies have a mandatory training in place to drive that culture. The board, the teams have a diverse representative. The product, where we call it as responsible design. One of the important factor is diversity and inclusion. By diversity, I mean you have those data sets, for example, your people working on it, who can give you this varied example. The variables which you count, you're not limited to 2 or 3 variables, but now you have a bigger set to work on, which can eliminate this bias. Second, inclusion. Having a proper, I'll take a very small example as a boardroom or a team meeting, where there could be few people who speak less, and you observe or note that as a behavior of that person. Maybe you are missing a point if you are leaving that person's voice on the table. There should be some ways to include that person. Go round robin, for example, make that voices heard, have that voice on the table that contributes to your product design. It starts from the product vision, ideation, product design, and all. When it comes to execute, it's much later in the cycle. So have those sampling much earlier in the process that can reduce that bias, which can unconsciously arise in organization itself. As a leader, we can enforce some of those things as a teammate. So each one carries that responsibility to bring that, voice that, and do that in the work you're doing.
I think it's important to note too that we're in a time of great cultural shift around how we document and report the use of data. And so to bounce off of what you were saying, Ruchi, is that certainly we know biases exist in almost every data set. And I see some of the questions coming in between public and private data and how we think about, well, the origin story of this data. How do we, really rely on it to make decisions? But remember, part of these conversations and what's so valuable in asking these questions is we're creating the cultural shift in order for what Ruchi's saying, those data teams, wherever the origin of that data is coming from, to think differently around biases and some of these other questions. So the most important part right now is documenting these types of questions, being transparent about it in the plans, reports, recommendations we make. In terms of a decision based off of that data, it has to be weighted to the potential for some of these biases to exist. And that could be another conversation about how do we actually do that effectively. So the most important piece there is that we're documenting and then creating a culture shift to feel more confident in relying on good data that tries to avoid biases more holistically.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also, as I mentioned before, if it's possible, work with data professionals. They can use statistical methods, predictive modeling to understand the bias, to identify it, and maybe use some statistical methods to kind of compensate for the biased data. Like they can do, there are special techniques for weighing data, and this will help to better reflect on the demographic representation.
Okay, we have to wrap up, and there's still more questions. This was a wonderful conversation, and very eye-opening. So thank you for joining us, and I feel as though you all need to come back for a part 2 here. So start thinking about that. Thanks to the technology division for sponsoring today's event, and of course, Women in Data, the Seattle chapter, and everyone for joining today. Don't forget to log your CM credits, and our 2024 schedule will be launched probably within the next week or so. So head over to our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast to register for all of the upcoming sessions. And don't forget, this is recorded and you can find it either on our YouTube channel. I know the technology division has some stuff that they're joining us. And this has been a really great ending to our 2023 webcast season. And we'll see everyone next year. So thanks, everybody.
Hey,
have a good
can
one.
we take a picture before we go?
you.
Yes, we can. Hold on.
Awesome.
Okay,
Are you going to
smile.
take it?
Yeah, I'll take it. I got it.
Awesome.
Ready? Got it.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
everyone.
I'll
for
send it to you
joining us
all.
today.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.